Okay, good evening. It's 6 p.m. Thank you so much for joining us for the UTA Moves 2050 UTA Long Range Transit Plan virtual public open house tonight. My name is Megan Waters. I am the Community Engagement Director at UTA. Before we get into the content really quick, I just want to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about this evening. And just for the record, this is being recorded. We're also live streaming to Facebook, so just be aware of that. We will have a brief presentation from our colleagues at Nelson Nygaard. I'll pass it over to Thomas in a moment, but I also want to let you know we will have a Q&A period after the presentation. There are a couple ways for you to submit a question. We have some digital tools on the Zoom platform with the chat box as well as the Q&A feature. So feel free to use either one of those, whatever you're most comfortable with, to ask us some questions about the long range transit plan. We also have closed captioning available. You can turn that on your Zoom platform if that is something that would be helpful to you. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Thomas Whitman.
Great, thank you, Megan. I want to start off a brief presentation by talking about what is UTA Moves 2050, or what is a long-range transit plan. It's something that responds to what is the 30-year needs, looking at how the region is growing. What are some of the transit investments necessary to maintain mobility over the next 30 years? To ensure that the economic vitality of the region remains. This is not a plan that is about what should bus service look like next year, or what should the bus stop close to my house look like. This is more about what is the vision for the future and how do we improve mobility in the future as well. And as a part of this, we're looking at not just being constrained by, okay, we have this amount of resources for this, but to try to think big in terms at the beginning. What are the options that we have that can help and create that mobility and not be restricted by what that funding might look like? This process has been going on for close to a year right now, where we started off, with defining what our goals and objectives were, talking with a series of different stakeholders as well as the public, and a series of almost every municipality within the service area, assessing what some of the needs are within the region, and ultimately developing a draft vision, a fiscally unconstrained draft vision that we're presenting to you today, and have been holding a series of open houses across the region to then get feedback to help us understand what some of the priorities that are, should be to include in the final 2023 long range vision for UTA. So we anticipate completing this process by the end of this year. Now, how do we create a plan? What are some of the things that went into this? One of the first steps is to try to understand what are some of the criteria that we're going to use to measure how well a given investment strategy might work. We took a look at what previous plans they had in terms of from what the Mountain Association of Governments, the Wasatch Front Regional Council, as well as UTA had in their existing plans to help understand what investments were they looking at long term. And we also took a further look at what are some of the needs that we saw based on population and employment growth, and some of the regional travel patterns that are anticipated, to see if there's any other unmet needs that we might want to move forward as a part of this. The next step for developing the vision is to get feedback from you, the public, from key stakeholders, to help understand, of all these different ways we can enhance mobility, what's most important. And then ultimately use the evaluation process as well as the feedback that you're going to be giving us to help us understand what that ultimate prioritized list of service investments over the next 30 years might look like. When we talk about the potential investment strategies, one of the things we want to keep in mind is that there's no one strategy that fits the need for everything. And we looked at a series of different potential investment strategies, ranging from front runner to innovative mobility solutions, or on-demand flexible types of services that fulfill the need to enhance mobility across a wide range of potential land uses, job sites, as well as built environments. One of the things we focused on also was the idea of a frequent frequent service network, a network where service comes every 15 minutes throughout the day, so you don't have to look at a schedule, and that it's convenient enough for you to be able to access service throughout the day. And we looked at this frequent service network for a variety of modes, including tracks, the streetcar, rapid bus, which is as well as regular bus service. So we had a range of potential strategies that we could look at in terms of enhancing service within the region. We weren't held to saying this is only about front runner, this is only about tracks, or this is only about bus. It's about everything, and it's about investing the right tool and the right mobility strategy in the right area. Ultimately, the UTA Moves 2050 is proposing 4 different investment strategies, and I want to talk about each one of these separately. The first one is maintaining our system, and this is making sure that there's the resources available, that the existing service and the existing investments that have been made continue to be out there. It also includes provisions for upgrading the service fleet to have reduced emissions, ensuring that the capital facilities that are necessary to operate transit are there, such as the maintenance space, park and rides, in the IT infrastructure, as well as transit centers and locations for where buses go are there as well. And it also accounts for workforce investments, because without an adequate workforce, we can't deliver some of the transit investments that we want to be looking at. The second investment strategy is, we call it, make the system work better. And there's several different elements associated with this, including ensuring fast and reliable service so that we keep our existing customers and attract new customers to use the service, targeted capital improvements that will improve speed and reliability for both bus and rail services, so that we're more competitive with automobile travel times, as well as technology investments that are customer facing as well as back end facing, to ensure that we use the latest technologies to improve reliability and improve access and improve responsiveness to our customers today as well as in the future. A third investment strategy is to expand the frequent service network. And this is, again, looking at expanding service that comes every 15 minutes throughout the day. And this is not focused just on bus or just on tracks. This looks at this concept for front runner, for tracks, for bus services, and it looks at different elements of how we can also improve the speed and reliability of existing services and existing frequent services to upgrade that service so that bus service can operate more like rail service, so that we have more corridors that look like the UVX that in Provo and Ogden, that have targeted speed and reliability improvements to make buses move faster along existing city streets. And again, improve mobility and improve access throughout the area. The last investment strategy is to make the system work better and serve different growth areas. And what this includes is operate more services on weekends, in particular on Sundays. Have service operate later in the evenings. Upgrade some of the frequencies of some of the some existing services to make it more convenient for potential customers. And begin looking at where growth is happening and where people are going from those high growth areas, and adding new routes to begin serving those new areas. And this is not just about adding new rail services or adding new bus services, but it's also using some of the new technologies, some of the flexible services, some of the innovative different ways we can provide first last mile services, first last mile access to provide geographic coverage in areas that are difficult for a big bus or for rail service to provide mobility. The other element is to introduce a new type of service, which is bi-directional limited stop all-day service that's freeway based to provide faster service that's more competitive with the automobile in certain travel markets where we saw an all-day market, or we could supplement some of the existing service investments that have already been made. So that's an overview of the 4 different investment strategies. What does that look like in practice? And we have 3 different examples, the north, central, and south service areas I want to talk about, touch base on. And for each one of these, there's a QR code that allows us, if you click the QR code, it should take you right to the map that's shown on the right-hand side right here. So you can have a slightly better view for this. But for each one of the different service investment areas, I want to show some of the highlights and talk about this. And I want to reiterate that these are fiscally unconstrained right now, that the ultimate final vision may not look like this, as we have to take that step and make sure that we can afford everything that we're showing as a part of this plan. So some of the highlights for the north service area, which includes Box Elder, Davis, and Weber counties, includes more frequent service on Front Runner and Front Runner service 7 days a week. It includes additional services to growing communities such as Layton, Roy, Farmington, and Ogden, and then better service to major employment sites such as Hill Air Force Base. It includes additional weekend frequency and more later evening service than what is out there today. And for some of these faster growing residential areas, some of these lower density areas where we know there's a need, but it's very difficult for a bigger bus to get into some of these areas, we'd be looking at innovative mobility solution zones to provide better geographic coverage. In the central area, this includes Salt Lake as well as Tooele counties. Some of the highlights for this include the more frequent Front Runner service, more frequent track service, as well as if we look at some of the concepts outlined in the Future of Light Rail study, potential improvements in the downtown area, as well as potential for new lines, better utilizing some of the existing tracks that are already out there. Be looking at new connections to various different areas, including more service to Salt Lake City Airport, more service to the Daybreak area, as well as to West Valley, City. A potential connection, for instance, is a connection between West Valley and Salt Lake City Airport. Something that does not exist today in a direct manner. But when we looked at the travel patterns and some of the market potential, is something that stood out as a potential connection that could be warranted. We're also looking at a network of new routes throughout the region, including in particular Southwest Salt Lake County, one of the highest growth areas in Salt Lake County. And this was we feel like with additional growth becomes the opportunity to transition and to supplement some of the on-demand services in these areas with fixed route service. Like the north region, we'd be looking at adding additional weekend frequency, additional later evening service, as well as innovative service solution zones throughout the region as well. I think the one other thing I want to touch base on is the future service and the future travel demands shows continued regional travel growth between Utah County and Salt Lake County. So adding more service that connects Utah County and Salt Lake County is one of the other elements that we wanted to move forward. The last element is, the last area is some of the highlights for Utah County, the South Service area. And in this case, it would also include the frequency improvements and the span of service improvements, the Sunday service and improved weekend service on Frontrunner. It would also include an extension from Provo to Payson. So 3 new stations on Frontrunner. It would include new service, new bus routes to Eagle Mountain, Saratoga Springs, Springville, Spanish Forks, Salem, and Payson. It would include a new bus rapid transit route along the Central Corridor, if that connects Lehigh, Provo, and Ogden. Pardon me, not Provo, Ogden. The a UVX
Orem.
extension. Yeah, Orem. Thank you. A UVX extension, to look at the fantastically successful UVX and extend it to the Vineyard Frontrunner station, and enhanced connections to Salt Lake County. Again, responding to some of the increased travel demand that we're anticipating between Salt Lake and Utah counties, and then improved weekend frequency, later evening service, as well as innovative mobility service zones. The UTA board created a strategic plan in the past year and had a series of goals laid out as a part of that strategic plan. And as we think about all the different investment strategies that we have here, we're going to be looking at measuring how well each one of these investment strategies does based on the goals laid out by the UTA board. So these are some of the elements that we're going to want to take a look at and be consistent with some of the direction that the board has given us and the region to say, how can we measure success? And how are we going to measure which one of these investment strategies we should be moving forward with first? So here's a series of different board goals, as well as some of the potential ways we can measure success for each one of the different investment strategies. You may have also noticed as a part of the investment strategies, there's a couple of things that we are not looking at making a recommendation on. There's still 3 or more different processes still underway where it's not 100% clear where we need to go with this, and we want to wait for those processes to play out before we put it into a long-range transit plan. And this includes the Point to the Mountain efforts, the Lower Cottonwood Canyon, mobility, improvements, as well as some of the seasonal services such as a ski bus. There's still a lot of open questions with this, and we want to ensure that there's flexibility within this plan to respond to whatever comes out as a preferred alternative for each one of those different efforts. So where are we today? We're at a point where we want to listen to what your feedback is for each one of the different strategies or some of the things that you've seen as a part of this presentation or have seen online. And we're going to take that along with the evaluation process and ultimately develop that final vision that outlines what are the improvements that UTA should be planning for and investing in the next 10 years and the following 10 years after that, and then in the 20 to 30 year timeline as well. So where do we go from here? We want to hear your feedback on the draft vision. The vision is fiscally unconstrained, which is, we don't have enough dollars to implement everything that we've shown you on this map. But what we want to hear from you is to understand what's most important of the elements that you've seen. What are some of the things that you really like? What are some of the things that you don't necessarily like as much? And what are some of the ideas that you want to ensure move forward as a part of this process so that it is included in the final 30-year plan and UTA Moves 2050? We want to get your feedback on this, and there's a couple different ways we can get your feedback on this. Now, first of all, there's the interactive map, which is a QR code in the middle of this slide right here that will lead you to a map that shows the entire service region, and it allows you to provide feedback on a route level and as a part of a regional level to help us understand what do you like, what do you not like, is there a line or the investments that we outlined as a part of that in the right places. There's also, QR code for a story map, and this is it's in essence a longer website that walks through what, how do we get, what are some of the things we looked at as a part of this process, and how do we get to where we are today, and highlight some of the improvements as well. And finally, there's a QR code for UTA Moves 2050, which is the project website that UTA has for this. So there's, there's a lot of information out there, and I'm sure there's a lot of potential questions that are going to come out of this process. That concludes the formal presentation, and I'd like to open things up to questions that we can help hopefully answer, and in terms of what we looked at, or in terms of what you might like or what you might not like. But we strongly encourage you to take a look at the interactive map and provide your feedback there, because there's a lot of service area here, and there's a lot of potential improvements here. With that, Megan, I want to pass it back to you to facilitate any potential question and answer.
Absolutely. Thanks, Thomas. I think really quick before we go to, we do have one question in the Q&A box to start, but I was wondering if you could just give us a little bit more information, because this has come up in some of the public open houses as well, just a brief description of that innovative mobility zone that we see on the map, kind of in the shaded area.
Yes. Innovative mobility zone is a zone where it's designed, where flexible services are available, on-demand type services are available, and it can range from anything from having a vehicle provide on-demand services that is UTA operated. It could be a subsidy for an Uber or Lyft. It could be a bike share or scooter share that helps provide access to areas that are inaccessible or less accessible for fixed route services. It's a catch-all for flexible services that are not a 40-foot bus or a 30-foot, 5-foot bus, that allows us to provide service in areas that are lower density, and provide more accessible service in those areas. So smaller vehicles, flexible services, on demand, and also incorporating some of the newer technologies such as scooter share, bike share, and things like that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I do want to introduce too, we have a few UTA folks on the line as well. We have Russ Fox here. He's our Director of Planning at UTA, as well as Alex Bain, who's our Manager of Strategic Planning. So we've got quite the team to help answer some of these questions. We also have our colleagues at Nelson Nygaard, with Thomas Whitman, as well as Alex Weber and Oren Eschel. So thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to go first to the Q&A, and this question came in early. So I am going to just read it out, and then I think maybe someone from the UTA team would want to take a stab at this. So the question is, what is UTA's plan to initiate the Rio Grande plan and a regional rail plan to connect our smaller cities?
So I could take a go at that and let others add as needed. We've gotten a lot of interest, questions about the Rio Grande plan. And this is a plan that was, is gaining some traction with folks. And it's a very ambitious plan to realign some of the rail that runs through Salt Lake City, and to connect it to the Rio Grande station, and to put some of the rails into a trench box that goes underneath. It's not quite a tunnel, but something similar. They have that in Reno, Nevada, among other places. But one thing that's happening with that right now is Salt Lake City has received a Reconnecting Communities grant that includes a number of different items. That also includes a preliminary feasibility study to see look deeper into some of the costs and possibilities of some of the items in the Rio Grande plan. I would say that a challenge that we have as UTA is that we are do not either own the land nor the buildings nor the right of way in much of the places that would be impacted and need to be changed in order to implement that plan. So we are certainly going to be a partner in the study with Salt Lake City, but there's a number of other players that have a lot more control over the land and right of way, including Salt Lake City, UDOT, the state of Utah, Union Pacific, et cetera. So we are interested in being partners and however that moves forward. But we unfortunately do not, it's not something that we own the land and could just go wholesale make that change. But we will see what happens over the next year or so as the feasibility study progresses. As far as plans to expand regional rail, we have some efforts both through the Front Runner Forward program and through our Future of Light Rail and TechLink program that's looking at expansion of commuter rail and light rail. I will say that as Thomas pointed out earlier in the presentation, that we're also looking at a number of different solutions because we know that even by 2050, not every city, it's just not economically feasible unless a great change in how transit is funded happens to provide rail service to every city along the Wasatch Front. But we are looking at a combination of services to connect people via a variety of transit modes.
Thanks, Alex. If there's any follow-up, I'm going to mark that question done for now, but please feel free to follow up if there are additional points to make on that. So I'm going to first go over to Carlos in the chat. The question is about bus-only lanes. So how realistic are bus-only lanes? Are there obstacles to bus-only lanes? They say, I love more frequency and more routes, but still, if we're stuck behind cars, it will counteract the frequency, basically. They say, I think UVX is successful because of the bus-only lanes, and OGX would be the same. Maybe implement them into more popular routes like the 850 in Utah County, for example. So maybe could we speak to the feasibility and logistics around bus-only lanes?
Sure. We agree that bus-only lanes are great. There's a number of challenges in some places. We partner very closely with UDOT and local municipalities, and there is a desire for balancing multiple modes at the same time. So we have that challenge. We are working, I believe Thomas mentioned that earlier in the presentation, on a number of speed and reliability efforts, including bus-only lanes, as well as queue jumps that let buses go to the front of the line when they're waiting at a stoplight, transit signal priority, and other things to speed up bus service. But we are certainly looking at a number of different ways to do that. One
Alex may have frozen. Russ, would you like to add anything kind of to wrap up the line of thinking that Alex was going down?
Just again, as he was talking about our partnerships with oh, Alex is back. So do you want to finish up your thought? Oh, nope, we may have lost him again. But again, our partnerships with UDOT and the
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm going to leave my camera off, unfortunately.
That's all good. Go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, so we continue to try to work with them on some of those right-of-ways and the ways that we can try to get those bus-only lanes. Another service that is coming out is going to be the Mid-Valley line. That is going to be a line that's going to be heading out west through Taylorsville, and so that one will have some, again, some bus-only areas. But again, it's supposed to be very similar to like the UVX and OGX lines. So those that will be starting construction pretty soon. But again, working with those communities to try to have those bus only areas. So our challenge is we just don't own the right of way is probably the best answer I could say.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for that question. I'm going in chronological order here. So we see a lot of questions coming in. I'm going over to James's question next. Is there any plan to offer sub 15-minute service intervals in Salt Lake County, similar to UVX, either with tracks or having rapid bus on heavy lines like Redwood or State Street?
Yes, there's several different corridors that are anticipated for that. From the bus side, the northern part of State Street, Redwood Road, as well as Second South are all opportunities that have been identified as a part of this process. There's also the opportunity to increase service on tracks was also examined as a part of this. But there's also there'd be some significant capital improvements that would be necessary before that could occur, but that was also examined as a part of this. But yes, having more frequent service than every 15 was looked at this as in certain key corridors that if we go into the Maptionnaire, the interactive map, and you click on a given corridor, it should give you the option what the anticipated frequency, could be for that corridor. And those are some of the ones that, I would start with, because I know they have, better, 10-minute service or about 10-minute service associated with each one of them, or better.
Great, thank you, Thomas. I'm going next to Curtis. Hi, Curtis. So Curtis's question is about the percentage of population served. So they ask, do you have a rough idea of what percentage of the population served would live within catchment areas of fixed bus routes under the plan, under the long range transit plan here? And in other words, he says, how many people would be within a quarter mile of a bus stop or half a mile of a light rail stop? Do we have a rough idea about that information, Thomas or Russ?
Yes, we do. And let me try to find that real quick. Right now, we would have, there'd be an increase of get with the entire plan, there will be 31% more people and 19% more jobs that would be within a half mile of rail and frequent bus service, and 24% more people and 24% more jobs within a half mile of all anticipated UTA service. And this includes I'm not sure if that answers the question, or that's what you'd be looking for, but those are some of the rough numbers that we tried to calculate in order to assess how much more mobility would be available as a part of this.
What I'll just add on to one other thing with it. It's not necessarily identified probably within the plan yet, but UTA and Wasatch Front Regional Council and local communities are working on station area plans around any light rail stop or bus rapid transit stop. And it's actually a requirement from the state legislature. So there's a lot of planning that's happening to try to increase that catchment area. So I just wanted to add on top of that.
Yeah, ultimately, we would, if everything in the plan would be implemented, 1.5 million people would live within a half mile walking distance of anticipated UTA services, or about 62% of the entire service area total.
That is exciting. Thank you both for answering that question. We have a question here from Darren. about UTA on demand. So the question is about how we plan to increase UTA on demand service, recognizing that some of our areas are exceeding demand.
I can take that one.
That'd be
So
great.
yeah, so a couple of things just for people to be aware of. We have proposals in our upcoming budget, especially for the South Jordan area, to be able to enhance that service. So we're going to be putting some more money into it to try and increase that capability to manage that and to bring that up to a better demand. Same thing is happening on the Salt Lake City west side, and that is a service that is provided by. It's actually sponsored by Salt Lake City, and they have committed to put additional funds to try and increase that service. So I would say that as we evaluate these systems, always look at as it's highlighted in the plan is to make our system work better. Sometimes that is just a matter of providing that additional funding before we will open up something else, in order, so nothing is taking away from something that's already operational.
Thanks, Russ. I am going next to Jordan's question. The question is about a track station around Daybreak and eventually another one going to Mountain View Village in Riverton. The question is about whether those will be part of the red line and any estimates as to when those stops will come online. Other track stations coming around West Jordan, South Jordan, Riverton. So maybe we can talk about the tracks plans in the UTA Moves 2050 plan. Would that be a good way to take that question, UTA team?
Let me try to take an attempt, and let me start this. First of all, the future of light rail study, outlines a series of potential improvements, for the entire rail system that looks at, changes to potential frequencies, as well as speed and reliability improvements to improve the travel times. It also looks at, potential, changes to how service operates in the downtown area, and outlines a series of options to improve travel times and directness and serve new areas in the downtown area, as well as potentially have a fourth line, through there. Whether, some of the, from an extension perspective, extending further from, from Daybreak, is, it was my understanding that this was not in one of the existing WFRC plans. And, this is not, we did not look at adding additional stations as a part of this effort along that line. There are certain elements, that, given the potential for improved development, that we looked at corridor preservation and right-of-way preservation to keep that option open in the future. As we look at how the region continues to develop in that area. I'm not sure if that's, if there's anybody from UTA that would like to add to that. But I figured I'd start the conversation with that.
I can try. If I don't drop off, I'm going to shut my camera off just in case. We're continuing to look at Southwest Salt Lake County and connections. There is some preserved corridor that exists there now, that's in the plan that our Metropolitan Planning Organization partners have. There's a study going on right now that UTA is a partner on with Harriman to look at different ways to increase service in that area, and potentially start with some other type of service and potentially work up to rail in the future.
Well, I will add one other thing, that there is a planned station within Daybreak. It's near the future ballpark site for the new bees. So that is in the plan. That is actually in the regional transportation plan. So we are working with South Jordan and the Larry H. Miller Group, the owners of the remaining Daybreak area, on how that will play out. So I did just want to clarify that there is one that is planned, and it's just connecting the additional part of the red line. But as Alex and Thomas said, the other stuff is corridor preservation and kind of we're calling it a refresh, looking at the Southwest Salt Lake County area, working with Wasatch Front Regional Council.
Thank you. And thanks everyone for all these questions. This is really great. Going over to a question from Bryant. The question is about providing adequate strategies to help provide adequate transportation for those who don't or cannot afford a car, specifically on the west side of the Salt Lake Valley, where often buses aren't as available as they are on the east side. So maybe we can talk about the strategy looking at the community's needs in the development process, Thomas.
Certainly we looked at where different investment opportunities were to match where the needs were. And as a part of this, we looked at where some of the higher needs areas are, where the areas are where folks didn't have vehicles, where folks were more likely to have mobility challenges or to simply have affordability challenges with existing vehicles. And then we targeted some of those areas with additional services in order to provide that access and the frequency associated with that. There was a series of, one of the big elements of the UTA Moves, is improvements in bus service in the areas that are on the west side. And this includes frequency improvements for east-west services, as well as additional options for north-south services so that the west side would have better connectivity to a series of destinations and more frequent service that goes with that. So it is, there's a recognition that the west side of Salt Lake Valley is growing, and that service needs to grow in that area to match that and to take care of some of the needs that you've identified here.
Thank you. The next question is from Darren, I think kind of similarly about connectivity, but the question is, how will you transport passengers from the Draper Track Station to the proposed Lehigh BRT bus rapid transit that will run from a frontrunner station that only has linked-in trains once per hour when the Draper Tracks has trains running every 15 minutes?
There is a line, a new, we call rapid bus line or high frequency service line, connecting Draper and Lehigh in the plan, with service anticipated on weekdays at least every 15 minutes, throughout the day. So that there's a significant amount of growth anticipated in that area, and this would be a way to begin connecting those two areas and to provide mobility into areas that currently don't have any development on there, but are anticipated to in the future. And a route or a connection that comes every 15 minutes that connects tracks, front runner, as well as the BRT investments in Utah County will close that gap. I talked about it earlier about the connection between Salt Lake County and Utah County. This is one of those investments, to provide a frequent service route between those two areas that does not exist today, to upgrade from the current hourly service that's out there.
And to add just a slight bit of additional context to that, in addition to the long-range transit plan efforts, there's a recognition in the ongoing point of the mountain transit project efforts that there'll need to be adjustments to the transit network that connects into that in order to make that more successful. So that's all being considered as part of that as well.
Great. This next question I'm going to throw to Russ and Alex. It's about relationships. And the question is, how will you work with cities that may be resistant to UTA's efforts and especially regarding the bus rapid transit line running north-south through Utah County. So do we want to talk about what's being done to work together with cities and municipalities on solutions that work well for them?
So I can start, and certainly Russ, if you feel free to jump in as well. Partnerships is really what makes our service and projects work. We meet continually with communities, and in regards to the Central Corridor BRT, which is the project I believe is being referenced here. We've met with communities throughout that. We're doing some additional work in the next year. We'll continue to work with those communities and engage with the elected officials and with UDOT and with folks in the community to come to an agreement on what the best path forward for those projects are. But we know in a regional network, it's important for everybody to be on board. So we want to, work with folks to figure out what the best way to make things work for everyone involved.
Nothing to add, Russ? Thumbs up from Russ. All right, cool. Thanks for the question. I am going to go over here. So the question is from Ernest. Are there any hopes of some of these efforts, such as late night service, increased frequencies, happening sooner rather than later, i.e. before 2050?
Let me start by saying I hope so. In the introduction, I mentioned, that don't expect any of these improvements to happen next year or in the next 6 months. This is a long-range transit plan. How we're looking at this is like what investments can be afforded and are most important, or best meet the mobility needs of the region in the next 10 years, in the following 10 years, and then between 2040 and 2050. And so, I would anticipate, I can't guarantee it, we still have to go through the evaluation process, that some of the frequency and service band improvements would happen in the first 10 years. What those might look like right now, I'm not sure we know. But if this is something that's super important to you, then it's one of the things that we want to hear back from you to say, this is the most important improvement that you could make of all the things that I see here. And let us know where the corridors or the areas are that are best suited to support those later evening service or more frequent service or some of the improvements, so that we can put it in the first, as much of that in the first tranche where it's most needed, the first 10-year investment window versus the third 10-year investment window.
So in the next iteration, in the final draft, if you will, of the long range plan, Thomas, will folks be able to expect sort of a phased identification of routes and service improvements?
It should lay out which routes should be prioritized for service investments or service improvements from a span and frequency perspective in the first 10 years, in the second 10 years, and then the third 10 years. So a total of 30 years. But lay out, here's approximately when you, based on the existing fiscal projections, that we could expect that to happen.
Great, thanks for just confirming and clarifying that. Going over to Mike's question, does UTA have plans to better serve emerging job centers like the inland port?
Let me start this, but some of the emerging job centers that we identified as a part of this process, a lot of these, such as the inland port, aren't necessarily very bus friendly to begin with, and we looked at various ways we could improve accessibility to some of these different areas. Some of these more industrial job centers through a combination of on-demand type services, as well as adding in certain key new higher frequency services that go through some of the emerging job centers. So there was a recognition of, we looked at where are the job centers today and where are the anticipated job centers in 2050, and looked at how do we begin matching up to those high job growth areas to ensure that there's accessibility for those as a part of this effort.
And to add to that, especially with places like the Inland Port, that's a big part of that is partnerships with the municipalities and cities. And as Thomas pointed out, if transit service is going to be successful, those areas need to have sidewalks. You need to be able to walk from transit service to the warehouses or whatever it is. But we were certainly partnering with all the municipalities involved as that moves forward to help make that successful.
And one last thing that I would just add on to the add-on is that don't forget, this is I don't know if we just recall that this is a plan that we will be looking at every 4 years. So this is not a one and done. So as we see these things emerge, and as Alex said, as we coordinate with the communities and the developers and things like that, to where if they can be transit supportive and if they can have those things, then as we continue to do this every 4 years, then that's something that will help us determine what other things could be provided. So again, this is not our only shot. We're going to be doing it. This is going to be a continuing effort every 4 years. So you'll hear from us quite a bit.
All right, I'm going to Doug's first question about connecting Provo and Orem to Heber. And then also whether there's consideration for year-round service to Sundance instead of just during the ski season.
Do you want to take service to Summit County?
So Summit County is currently outside of our taxing district. So they're not a part of the UTA service area. We do partner with Summit County, both High Valley Transit and Park City Transit, to facilitate connections, and they run some service into Salt Lake County now. But since they're outside of the UTA service area, we don't have that included at our plans at the moment. It doesn't mean that something couldn't happen. That would likely be a partnership with Summit County.
And this is, I think, Wasatch County and Utah County that we're talking about in this question.
I might have missed what. Okay, sorry.
No,
yes,
you're good.
For Wasatch County is also outside, so that would be a partnership with them. Or if something were to change and we were to change the boundaries of our taxing district, or it could be a special arrangement with them to do that. But we are beholden to operate service within the districts that are contributing to fund UTA, and at this point, Wasatch County is outside that area. And I think there was another part of the question maybe that I might have missed. Yes, yeah.
So it was year-round service to Sundance, so instead of just seasonal ski,
right?
Which is not currently included in the plan.
We did not include that as a part of the plan. That that it was part of the special services. It's ski services that we said that is not going to be a part of this effort. There's as Alex mentioned, it requires a partnership in order to operate something along those lines, and those partnerships need to be flexible. And we wanted to keep the options open in the future and not say here's what we should do or shouldn't do when it requires multiple partners to come to the table in order to make something like that happen.
Okay, so we've got a couple more questions. I just want to do a quick time check and let everyone know we have 6 minutes left. We are scheduled to end at 7 p.m. this evening. So we will answer a couple more, but please know we will summarize any questions we didn't get to and send that out to all registered attendees this evening. I'll also put our contact information, which you can find online, but I'll throw the email address in the chat as well if you'd like to talk to us offline. So the next question I'll read out is from Michael. Concerning innovative mobility, is there intent to work with UDOT and cities to increase protected lanes and or build separate corridors for the micromobility portion of that program?
It's overall I think Alex, mentioned, when we talked about, potential for bus lanes and what that might look like, it's very similar, for for innovative mobilities. It typically, I mean, there's always, there's always going to be attention for what is the curb lane going to be used for, whether it's used for a bike lane, scooters, buses, streetcar, whatever you want to put in this. It requires a lot of conversation between the municipalities and UDOT in order to make anything like this happen. I can't say, that this plan, goes into great detail in terms of, what those conversations might look like, but it will identify, from a costing perspective, what some of the potential opportunities there are in order to enhance speed and reliability.
Thanks, Thomas. I think too, there's a couple of questions that have similar sort of lines of thinking around partnerships, with which we've talked about a little bit. One person asks what else they can do to support public transit in their areas, as well as other strategies for increasing use of and demand for public transit. So I think just knowing, right, in summary, what we've talked about is this is a team effort, and so there are a lot of players at the table that we do collaborate with and need to continue collaborating with to make the system work well and be improved. Does anyone else want to add to that? I'm not reading out the exact questions, but if you want to add anything on that note.
The only thing I would just add is that, yeah, it's just those partnerships. There are certain tools that we get afforded through the state representatives or through the state legislature, and as those things come forward, it's good to support them with your community. So as those come up, you'll see things that will show up in the paper as far as like if there's potential additional transit taxing and things like that, or transportation taxing. That happens on like the sales taxes. Those types of supports are always just appreciated because, if they can go to transit, then that just helps provide us additional service.
So we do have just 2 more questions, and again, I'll throw the contact information. So please refer your questions to us via email or on the website if we don't get to it today. But the question is from Doug. How soon can we expect the front runner to be extended to Payson? How soon can we expect Sunday and holiday service with the front runner in UVX? So we know we want it all as soon as possible, but maybe Thomas, you can just reiterate some of that phasing discussion.
Yeah, the next step that we're going to be looking at here is what is, from a fiscal perspective, what is possible. And so we're taking a look at what are the anticipated revenues that are coming, anticipated over the next 10 years, over the next 20 years, and over the next 30 years, to help us understand which one of these different elements we need to we can prioritize. There's a separate effort that is going on right now that looks at extending UTA further to the south. There's pretty interesting engineering work and planning work that still needs to be done to help us understand the who, what, why, and where that's going to take place. But so I can't give you, I personally can't give you an answer in terms of when the front runner extension of Payson is going to be possible. But we are going to be looking at, as a part of this process, within the fiscal constraints that we have based on the financial model, to be able to say, be able to identify when it might be realistic for Sunday or holiday service on front runner and UVX, as well as other routes as well. But those are pretty candidates that, based on their existing ridership, are pretty high up there as well. So that's one of the things that we will take a look at and will identify as we progress and finalize a fiscally constrained plan.
And I'm just going to add on one more little thing with that, Thomas, is that for the front runner, there's been a lot of funding that has already been allocated and considered. And so that's going to be something that will help us with that financial constraint, because the state has provided actually quite a bit of funding. There's federal funding that we're pursuing. So depending on what happens with the federal funding, if that continues to pass from DC, then that will obviously help us more as we do that double tracking and being able to do those improvements to front runner.
Excellent, thank you. I know Raja has a question, but I'm just typing a quick response. I think if you all go again to the interactive map and check out where we have those improved services, new services in different areas across the service area from north to south, leave your comments, tell us what's important to you, and let us know what you think. So we will be in touch with you. I'll send the recording. It will also be available at rideuta.com/LRTP. That's long range transit plan. And then you can also email us at rideuta.com. LRTP@rideuta.com. I was just typing that in the chat as I was saying it. So thank you all so much for your time tonight. We're really excited to be talking about this with all of you, and we appreciate your questions and interest. So have a great night.